This is for a boy between 9 and 11. This is for a boy between 9 and 11. Katakush, just outside of Mosul. This is a church that was completely destroyed by ISIS. As we were coming through, one of our team discovered one of the Operation Christmas Child shoe boxes. I don't know who gave it, who sent it, but it touched the life of a child at one point. And of course, we ask people when they pack a box to always pray. You never know where that box will go.
Where are the lost? Where are the hardest to get to people groups? Where has the gospel of Jesus not been preached and proclaimed? In Acts 13:47, for so the Lord has commanded us, saying, I have made you a light for the Gentiles, that you may bring salvation to the ends of the earth.
We live in a broken world, an evil world. Yet Jesus gave us orders. He said, go into the world and make disciples of all nations and baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We have a job to do.
When we talk about going to the ends of the earth, we're talking about shoebox gifts that are taking the gospel to the hardest to reach areas of the world.
If you want to bring hope to a broken society, it's the gospel. And Operation Christmas Child is not about passing out toys, it's about the gospel. Each kid, when they receive that box, they're going to hear the presentation of the gospel clearly. They make a decision for Christ, and then they're trained and equipped to go out and share their faith with others. And many times in areas where it's an unreached people group, the Bible tells us the time is now.
We're in the South Pacific. I want to reach these islands for Christ. These are the poor areas. People don't have any hope. People don't come here. There's no tourists here, but we're going to be here.
I'm right outside of Mazatlan, Mexico, about 6-hour drive up in the mountains with Operation Christmas Child. This is where people that are brave are taking Operation Christmas Child to the ends of the earth.
We need boxes that are packed by families, by churches and groups, but we also need boxes that are packed online. When you build a shoebox online, these are the boxes that give us access into hard-to-reach places of the world.
We go at great lengths, great effort to take these boxes to children in the most remote parts of the world. It's an incredible journey.
You know, the mission of Operation Christmas Child never changes. Children are coming to Jesus. Children are coming to faith. Children are being discipled. And children are taking the gospel to the ends of the earth.
One of the boxes, they're going to be out in the foyer where you can pick one of the boxes up that you put together, and you can be packing those or suggestions of what to pack in each one of the boxes according to a boy or a girl and what age group as well. If you're a person that says, you know what, I'm not real sure what to buy an 8-year-old boy who lives on the other side of the world. You know, that's how I am. You can build a box online where you go to SamaritansPurse.org and you just give, I think it's $25 last year. That will pay for all the stuff. They will pack the box with things that are good for kids in that part of the world, and then that'll also pay for the shipping, and so you can get that and send that off. If you do me a favor, though, when you bring your boxes in, like I said, we like to put them here to show how many we've done, to pray over those boxes before they leave. If you do an online box, just get an empty box. You can put a paper that says online and put it here anyway, so we'll be able to know how many we collected. If you have any questions, Marilyn, you can be out there after the service? Okay, so Marilyn, she'll be out there, and she has all the answers you could possibly want to ask us. She'll know all of it. But we'd love for you to be a part of that and help us reach people all over the world for Christ. When I was growing up, one of my many faults, I want to tell you, now listen real close. Don't hear wrong. When I was growing up, not last week, not last month, when I was growing up, one of my biggest problems I had was I was very cocky. I was very cocky, and I really, really hated to lose. Now, I don't know if any of y'all are people you don't like to lose, or you may be friends with somebody, you're married to somebody, you said they just don't like to lose. Guys, I was the president of the Hate to Lose Club. I mean, I despised it. I played a lot of sports growing up, and we would win a game, and if we won a game, my attitude was we were supposed to win the game. But if we lost, it would just eat at me. I didn't like to lose in sports. I didn't like to lose at Tiddlywinks. I didn't like to lose in school. If you know me well, as you get to know me, I'm not very smart. I'm not naturally smart. But I did know how to figure school out. And I also knew that I did not want anybody to make better grades than me. It had nothing to do with wanting to learn. I didn't care if I learned anything. I wasn't smart, but I would work hard to make the best grades I could all the way through seminary. Because I didn't want anybody to think I'm dumb. So that's all it was. It was pride. I was eat up with it. And to give you an idea how much I didn't like to lose, by the way, my mother-in-law is here today. She's been staying with us now for a little while. When Shelly and I were engaged, this was like a terrible moment for me. We all went down to Orange Beach, Alabama, to the beach, and got a big condo. It was Shelly, her two sisters, their husbands, their kids, my mother-in-law, my father-in-law, me. We're all in this big condos together, spending the week at the beach. Well, one night, my wife and my sister-in-law said, hey, let's play Phase 10. Now, Phase 10, if you don't know, is a little card game. It's this little bitty card game, and we're going to play Phase 10 together. You have to get these little 10 phases, and whoever completes their phases first wins. Well, guess who was winning? Big Daddy was winning, okay? I was doing good. And we were sitting at the table, and my mother-in-law was right across from me, and she's looking at her cards, and she's not making a move. And my sister-in-law looks at her and says, Mother, what card do you need? And she said, well, I need a red 2 or whatever. And she goes, do you need any of these that I have? I lost my mind. I looked at Shannon. I said, Shannon, what are you doing? She's like, what do you mean? So you can't give her a card? That's cheating. And then my wife said something that I still have not forgiven her for. My wife said, we're just having fun. I was like, I ain't having fun. I remember I was like, this is ridiculous. Because I married into the least competitive people I've ever met in my life. They just want to enjoy themselves. I'm like, that's insanity, okay? You don't just enjoy yourself. But all through there, I was cocky, I was arrogant, and a lot of it was I didn't want anybody to see my faults. I didn't want anybody to see my failures. I wanted people to think highly of me. And I tell you what, God had to do some things in my life. And I'm not sitting up here going, oh, and look at me now. I am just so humble and kind, and no. It's still something that's back there. But God had to bring me down to a place where he could use me more by making me more humble and making me more gentle. And we're going to look this morning at a passage Paul talks about where he's going to say something about how it means to follow Christ. Let me give you an idea of where we are here in the book of Ephesians we've been going through. The book of Ephesians is basically broken in two halves. The first half, chapter 1, 2, and 3, basically says, here is how you are saved. This is what God says is the way of salvation. This is what he has provided for salvation, and this is your response to his offer of salvation. So 3 chapters of here is how you become a follower of Jesus, become a Christian. Now he gets to chapter 4, and he shifts gears. He even starts out the chapter by saying, therefore. In other words, I've told you how to be saved, so because I've told you this is how you're saved, therefore, and now he's going to go, this is how you should live. If you're really a Christian, here's what you're supposed to do. And he spends 3 chapters showing us how to live. So let's look at Ephesians chapter 4, and he's going to start off with this way of showing us how to live the way of Christ. He says, therefore, I, a prisoner for serving the Lord, he's in prison here. He says, I beg you to lead a life worthy of your calling, for you have been called by God. And what he was saying here is God loved you so much, despite everything you've done, he called out to you and gave you the opportunity to be saved, to have a relationship with him, which has gone through the first 3 chapters. He said, now live a life worthy of that. He did so much for you. Now live your life in a worthy way of that calling. And here's where he starts out. He goes, he doesn't just say, live a life worthy of the calling. He's now going to say, and here's how you do it. And the first thing he says in how to live for Jesus, always be humble and gentle. Now, ladies, I would like to speak on behalf of all the ladies in the room. And the guys are going, don't do it. Ladies, I bet a lot of you ladies hear the word humble and gentle, and you think, I like those words. Those are nice words. I like people who are humble and people who are gentle. That's nice. In fact, I want my kids to be humble and gentle. In fact, I wish my husband was always humble and gentle. You like those words. Now the men, most men in this room go, I don't want anybody calling me gentle. You know, because we think gentle is kind of like weak. Gentle is kind of like, pushover. You know, a lot of you guys wouldn't want me to come up to you, and I've never seen you before, and I said, hey, my name is Ben. You say, hey, my name is whatever it is. And I say, man, you look really gentle. Most guys would go, no, I'm not. We don't want to be called gentle. And he starts out here going, if you want to, you've been called by God, you say you're a follower of Jesus, the first thing I'm going to tell you to do is be always be humble and gentle. You're going, really? Okay, well, we're going to see what he really meant by that here in a minute. So then he said, be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. Make every effort to keep yourselves united in the Spirit, binding yourselves together with peace. For there is one body and one Spirit, just as you have been called to one glorious hope for the future. There is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who is over all, in all, and living through all. So we're going to look this morning only at that first part, the first 2 verses. Next week we're going to look at the rest of the passage. But we're going to look what it says there about being humble and gentle and how it plays out in our life. Now I'm going to tell you right now, this is a verse, this is a passage, and I got ready to preach it, been looking through this all week, and I thought, you know what? They're all going to look at me this week and go, okay, we've heard that, we know that, be humble, be gentle. And I've been worried, I said, I'm going to preach this, and everybody's going to just go out, go to lunch, and forget it. Because a lot of us don't want to be humble and gentle. And I want this to be so, it's one of those things where I want it to impact your life like it's impacted mine. The way God has changed me and brought me joy and happiness and peace, the more I've strived to be humble and gentle. Now, by the way, at the same time, all week long, guess what God has done? He's given me lots of opportunities to try to be humble and gentle. I feel like I've been wearing a t-shirt all week that said, press my buttons. I mean, it's like things have happened all week long where I'm going, really? I've been flipped off twice this week. Not at church. Yeah, not at church. But out and about in Vegas. And you're probably thinking, you must be a terrible driver. It was not my fault. They were being ugly and rude. And you're trying to say, be humble and gentle. And yesterday was one of the worst things that could happen, to be humble and gentle. Many of y'all know I'm a huge Alabama football fan. And they lost yesterday at the University of Texas, which is bad enough that they lost. But, I grew up in Texas. That's where I grew up. And I hate the University of Texas. I mean, if the campus burned to the ground but nobody got hurt, that would be phenomenal. I was like, I hate the University of Texas. And I got relatives who are all big Texas fans. They're huge, diehard Texas fans. And so I was like, I'm going to be hearing from them and everything. And Alabama lost. I don't know if most of y'all out here, nobody cares about college football, but I'm telling you, when you live in the South, there's three things you love. You love Jesus, your family, and a certain college football team. Not necessarily in that order sometimes, but it's like, it's serious business. It is serious business. And I don't sit there and go, oh, well, Alabama lost. Oh, well, whoop, holly-la-la, It bothered me. And so last night, after the game was over, we had a church gathering at the Aviators game. And we had a big group of people who went to see the Aviators. And I was like, I told Shelley, I said, I don't want to go. I don't want to go see the Aviators. I said, we're going to go because I'm the pastor. That's it. You know why I didn't want to go? Because I thought, I'm going to show up, and the first thing I'm going to hear is, well, guess who lost today? Alabama lost today. Bah, 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 bah. I was like, I don't play that. Didn't want to come to church today. You know why? Exactly what happened in the first service. Well, hey, hook 'em horns, baby. I was like, and inside I'm going, you better be so glad I'm the pastor right now. Because it burns me. It just burns out. And the whole time I'm just like, I don't play games with this. And you know what I'm doing? While I'm saying, don't play with me, I'm looking at my notes where it says, always be humble and gentle. I don't want to be humble and gentle. Then tonight, I like an idiot, my biggest fan bases are the ones everybody hates. I like the University of Alabama, the Dallas Cowboys, and the Houston Astros. And everybody hates all of them. So tonight my Cowboys are going to probably lose, and I'm going to hear some more, how about them Cowboys? I don't play about them either, just so you know. By the way, I've always said that when I die, I want 6 Dallas Cowboys to be my pallbearers. So that way they can let me down one last time. So, but we're going to look this morning about being humble and being gentle. And I'm like, God, you're really funny this week. Ha ha. I've had a chance to prove it. So let's look at 4 things we see about how to be a faithful follower of Christ based on this passage. The first thing is this. A faithful follower of Christ will not change their commitment level to God based on circumstances. It will not change according to how good things are, how bad things are, how stressful things are. No matter what comes your way, you say, I will always live for the glory of Jesus Christ. I will always strive to be like Him, and I will always strive to be humble and gentle. Paul starts out by he says, hey, I am a prisoner because of the Lord. Because I love Jesus and preached about Jesus and taught about Jesus, I'm in prison. But even while he was in prison, it didn't change his love for God. It didn't change his devotion to Jesus. He didn't go, well, I don't deserve this. Poor, pitiful me. Why is this happening to me? Instead that while Paul was in a prison cell, he wrote something that we're reading today, 2,000 years later, that can still impact our lives. Circumstances didn't dictate how much he loved Jesus. He said, no matter what comes my way, I will love Him. The second thing is this, he notes, a faithful follower of Christ will evaluate his own life in comparison to Jesus. Now this is where he uses the phrasing back in verse 1. He says, as a prisoner serving the Lord, I beg you to lead a life worthy of your calling. Now the word worthy there is what's important. Because we look at it and say, well, what exactly does that mean? Okay, let me show you what it means. And this is a very important concept to look at. Paul used a Greek word called axios, and what it was used, it was a word that talked about scales. Now, not the bathroom scales that tell how much you weigh, but those old scales, the scales of justice, where there's a plate over here on a chain and a plate over here on a chain, and you put something on one and put something on the other, and you're trying to see how much they weigh by whether they balance or not. And you keep adding to one or taking away from one until they get perfectly balanced. He said when they're perfectly balanced, you know that they weigh the exact same amount. He said, you need to live a life worthy of your calling. And what he's saying is, your life, when it's weighed against Jesus, it needs to be equal. You need to compare yourself not to other people, not to what you think is right or what society says, but your life is to be judged by how do you live like Jesus. That's the standard. Because everyone in this room, all of us in this room, if you want to find somebody that you think you're better than, it doesn't take real tough thing, does it? There's plenty of people you go, well, I'm better than them. You can just look at the news and find plenty of people you go, well, I'm living better than them. You know, we don't compare ourselves to people, we compare ourselves to Jesus. So he says, look, live a life worthy of your calling. You say, well, okay, if I'm supposed to live a life equal to Jesus, which is what he said, he goes, what does that look like? And he starts out with the two biggest characteristics of Jesus. Always be humble and always be gentle. So let's look at those two things and see where our life weighs out on being humble and gentle. The third thing there you note is this. A faithful follower of Christ will be humble at all times. Okay, y'all know I love history. I love strange, weird historical facts. And I really like this little historical fact to me. When Paul was writing this letter to the Ephesians, he got to this word where he says, always be humble and gentle. The problem was the word he used for humble didn't exist. There was no such Greek word. If you looked in Greek literature, it didn't work. He made up a word. The Greek word is tapainophrosune. Aren't you glad you came to church to learn that? Tapainophrosune was this word. And they looked at it, guys looked at it and they go, that's not a word. There's no such word as tapainophrosune in the Greek language. Paul just made up a word. First time it's ever seen, right here in Ephesians. And the reason he did that was because he lived in a Greek world, in a Roman Empire world. They had no word for humility. And they had no word for humble. Because in their mind, humility or being humble was one of the worst possible characteristics you could have. In fact, the only thing they had close was a word that translated really to coward. Because they said what you really wanted to do in their mind was to elevate yourself as much as you could. You wanted people to see how smart you were, how successful you were, how rich you were, how accomplished you were. Anything you could do to elevate yourself, that's what you did. But man, to make yourself lower than that, they're like, no, that doesn't work. And so Paul makes up this word, tapainophrosune, that got translated to humble. And he would have went into the church here, this church in Ephesus, when he had talked to them. He said, guys, I want y'all to be tapainophrosune. And you want us to be what? Tapainophrosune. That's not a word. He goes, I know, I just made it up. They go, well, what does it mean? Well, here's what it means, guys. It means that you need to be like Jesus and always put others ahead of yourself. Always be the servant to other people. And they go, what? We don't get it. He says, okay, let me give you an illustration. He said, guys, look to your left and to your right. And so the people sat there and they looked to the right. And he goes, you need to tapainophrosune these people. What? You need to be humble. The guy on your right, his needs need to be more important to you than your own. He's like, him? Yeah. What about her? Yeah, same thing. Husbands, look at your wives. You need to tapainophrosune her. You need to humble yourself and put her needs ahead of your own. And wives, same thing. Oh, and by the way, how many of you guys have a job? And a few of them would go like, yeah, I got a job. How many of y'all work with somebody you don't really like? But yeah. And he said, tapainophrosune with that person. And they go, but I don't like him. He's a jerk. He said, I know. But do you want to be like you or do you want to be like Jesus? He said, put your needs ahead of their own. You serve because you're not trying to be a better you. You're trying to be like Jesus. You're trying to be on the scales. He said that's what humility was. Humility was not patheticness, being pitiful, and oh, woe is me. Being humble is not walking around going, well, I'm not that great, and I'm not that smart, and I'm not very talented, and I'm not very good looking. I'm so humble. You're not humble. You're annoying. Okay? And he tells us, he said, no, humility is a willingness to say, I will put others ahead of myself. That's exactly what Jesus did. Jesus is never about him. His whole life was humility. He was born in a manger, which a lot of us think, well, that's so sweet, because we see the little Christmas scenes, and it looks so nice, and we go, oh, I wish I was born in a manger too. No, you don't. No. It was disgusting. He was raised in a podunk little town. They weren't wealthy or anything. He was a nothing. When he lived his life, he didn't have wealth and extravagance. He gave up all that. And even when he died, he had to borrow somebody else's tomb to be buried in. Jesus was never about him. He was always about the glory of God and serving other people. He went and talked to people like the woman at the well that nobody would talk to. He went and talked to lepers who everybody threw out of the city. Wouldn't even let them come near the town because they were so unclean and dirty and had this leprosy that everybody might catch, and said, you can't even come in town. And I tell you what, when I get to heaven, I've always thought, I know you go, oh, I want to see my friends and my family, and I want to see Jesus. And some people say, well, who do you want to see from the Bible? And people usually say, oh, I want to meet Moses, or I want to meet David, or I want to meet Paul or Peter. Do you know who I want to meet? I want to meet Matthew. That's the biblical character that I want to meet more than anybody, is Matthew, the disciple Matthew. Because he was an amazing guy. He was a tax collector that everybody hated. Because he would take taxes for the Roman government and then tax them more than they should and pocket the extra money. He was stealing from people. And everybody hated him for it. The only people who would be his friend were other tax collectors and prostitutes. They were the most despised people around. And Jesus walks up to him one day and says, come follow me. He lets Matthew be in his inner circle. Nobody would have picked Matthew. I can almost guarantee you, I wasn't there so I can't promise, but I can almost guarantee you that when the other disciples came and Jesus goes, brothers, we have us another brother in the group. This is Brother Matthew. They're going, Jesus, have you lost your mind? Do you know what he does for a living? He goes, yeah, I saw him at work. That's where I found him. He was working. And the disciples were like, we don't want him here. He's a tax collector. And Jesus said, yeah, I know. Wait till you see what I'm going to do with him. Jesus humbled himself with other people even. He even humbled himself. The greatest thing was he said, I don't even care about myself so much that I will die on a cross for me and for you. And I'll give my life for you. What's funny about that word, tapanophrosune, it was that after Ephesians was written, that word now actually appears in other Greek literature after the writing of this book. You'll find ancient Greek literature that has the word now. But every time you see it later in other Greek literature, it was always in a very negative way. It was making fun of people and talking bad about them. And it was often used in literature to make fun and condemn Christians. And called those are those humble people. It was never a sign of respect. It was a sign that was derogatory and slanderous. The last thing there is this: a faithful follower of Christ will be gentle at all times. Now again, this is where a lot of men especially say, I don't want to be called gentle. I want to be called strong, capable, successful. That's what I want. Nobody wants to be gentle, because gentle sounds like the guy who's the doormat. He sounds like the guy that if somebody comes and wants to start a fight with, and they go, oh, don't, I don't want to. That's not what the word gentle means. The word gentle here is a word that was really talked a lot about in the breaking of horses. It was talking about something that was very powerful, but was under control. My grandfather actually was a man that what he did a lot was break horses. He would get wild horses, and he was really good at knowing how to break a horse. And he would work with that horse, and if you've never been around a horse, by the way, if y'all didn't grow up around horses very much, like I did, but I've been around horses. A wild horse is incredibly dangerous. They're unbelievably strong. Horses are incredibly strong. And if you mess with them the wrong way, you won't want to do it a second time, because they will hurt you or even kill you if they need to. They're very powerful animals. But if you get somebody who knows how to break a horse, they can make that horse go where they want them to go. They can actually get on the horse and ride it anywhere they want to ride it, and the horse will do exactly what it says. Now, when a horse is broken, has the horse lost its power? No. That horse is still far more powerful than any person that could ever get on it. That horse is still faster than any human could possibly run. That horse is still stronger than you could possibly imagine. But it's become gentle, its power under control. And Jesus was the ultimate example of power under control. He showed it many times. He was arrested in the garden. If you remember, they came to arrest him in the garden. And Jesus spoke a word. I don't remember, he spoke one time, they fell down. They got back up, and he didn't resist. He said, "Take me." He got to the cross. He could have easily come down on the cross, but he didn't. He had the power to do it, but he stayed under control so he could die for you and for me. I tell you what, Jesus had the power to do anything. He was fully God. And this is a big statement, if I were Jesus, I'm going to tell you right now, those Pharisees, y'all reading the Bible, they were always talking trash to him and saying horrible things to him and threatening him. I don't know if I could have handled that. But he'd be stern, he'd be firm. He'd speak the truth, but he'd stay under control because he knew what his purpose was. He knew his purpose was to glorify God with his life. And it's very interesting to me that when Paul starts talking about the first 3 chapters, here's how you give your life to Christ. Here's what it means to be saved. And then he goes, and now here's how you live it. The first thing he says is, be humble and gentle like Jesus. Equal to him. We live in a world just like the one the Ephesians lived in. Y'all know we live in a world where humility and gentleness is not promoted. We may like people like that, but our world says have more, make more, do more, get people impressed with you more, and it's all me, 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 me. But to be like Jesus says, you're going to be humble and you're going to be gentle. Last night I was laying in bed and I was thinking about the sermon. I was kind of running through my head. And I started just thinking, I thought, is there anybody in our church that I would consider to be humble and gentle like Jesus? Now remember, not wimpy and timid. No. There are people who are strong people, but they put other people first. They serve other people. They show Jesus. I see it. Now, guys, I'm going to tell you, no slam on other churches I've served in. But I could have done that at other churches, and I could have named some people for sure. I could name some right now, people who are very dear to me. But when I started running through the people in our church, it was like one name after another, after another, after another, after another, after another. One of the blessings of Spring Valley Baptist Church that's been in my life is being around so many people who genuinely love Jesus. And there's so many of you who put Jesus first in your life and you put others ahead of yourself. And it's such an amazing blessing. And I'm telling you this, if you're not that way, you can ask any of those people, does it make you happier to be that way? You know what? They're the happiest people in our church. Happiest people I know. Do you like being that way? Absolutely they do. And I'm going to tell you my own life. Now, look, I'm not going to sit up here and go, guys, I used to be cocky and arrogant, but now I am so humble. No. But I've come a long ways from where I was. And I will tell you personally, the more I try to be this like Jesus, and I still work on it all the time, but the more I try to be humble and gentle like Jesus, I'm telling you, the happier I am, the more at peace I am, the more joy I have in my life, the better my marriage is, the better my parenting is, the better my pastoring is. Everything is better. It's because we're being like Jesus. Let's pray. Father, I love you very, very much. I thank you so much for the patience you've shown me over the years. I thank you so much for the very difficult things that you've taken me through in order to break me, in order to try and get out some of the arrogance I had, the pride that I had. And even though I still struggle at times with that, God, I thank you that you took me through those hard times to try and make me more like Jesus. And Father, I pray that all of us in this room who call ourselves followers of Christ, that we will strive to not be a better version of us, but to really be like Jesus. And Jesus, that we will try and walk like you and talk like you and be like you and act like you and react like you. That everything will be about glorifying you and having you moving through our life. God, I pray for those in this room who may, deep in their heart, they may be admitting that there's some pride in there. There's some self-centeredness and some selfishness that needs to be rooted out. And Father, I pray they will not see that as they need to become a pushover, or they just need to become a doormat. But they'll see that they can be strong, but have it under control. And that serving other people is one of the greatest strengths anybody could have. Thank you so much for this wonderful church with so many people who deeply love you. And God, I pray that for those who are coming in this room each week, who are striving to become more like Christ, or maybe striving to know about Jesus for the first time, that they will see Jesus in these people, and it will help them to grow as well, to know you more. Thank you so much that you loved us enough to send your son Jesus. And Jesus, I can't thank you enough for your humility of putting yourself last and dying on the cross to pay the penalty for our sin. That you loved us that much, that you humbled yourself that much. Thank you for that. I do love you, and I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.